us going. So here with me today is David Cox, who's also going to be co-presenter.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, David.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, if you like, very quickly, I have had Parkinson's for about 10 years, and through an introduction from Vicky about a year ago, I got to meet Matt and have been privileged and since then to have been working with Matt on some very exciting developments. So back to you, Matt.
Yeah, and through this process, including Coxie's Long Walk, David's become a good friend. So without further ado, I will share my screen. Is everyone able to see that? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
So today I'm talking about the co-design and clinical trials of a new medical device that we're hoping can give some people with Parkinson's a light in the tunnel. So this presentation is going to be there's going to be a lot of information. We're going to go through it fast, but I believe it's being recorded. Is that correct, Vicky? Have we got recording on?
Yes, recording is on.
Yeah, so you'll be able to go back if you miss something, if I talk too fast, and other people who might not have made it to this meeting, they can come and watch this recording and join us that way. So the contents, I'm going to talk about the background, then the clinical trials that have been done with Shake It Up Australia Foundation funding. But where do we go from clinical trials? So we want to take this research and we want to make some widespread community benefit. So there'll be a section on that. Then many of you may have already completed a survey. So that's part of engaging the community and getting some early feedback so we know we're on the right track. So I'll talk about that. And finally, time for questions. So what is Parkinson's disease? It's a terrible condition. It affects over 10 million people worldwide and 100,000 or thereabouts in Australia, and there's currently no cure. So in about 2018, we made a breakthrough discovery. Now, I'm going to show you a little bit of a video that gives a bit of a background to this. I joined UNSW Founders, and this video was produced as part of that program. UNSW Founders is to help form startup companies that will be able to translate research. Now, I just think I actually made a mistake, so I'm just going to share again, and this time I'm going to include sound. So tell me that you can hear the sound. Hi, I'm Matt Brodie. Can you hear the sound?
Yes, you can hear that sound.
Walking to a house. 2 years before my dad passed away, his walking became a shuffling gait. This has inspired my treatment of accelerated aging and neurological disease. In 2018, we made a breakthrough discovery that brings hope to people living with Parkinson's disease.
I lost my health, and there's no price for that.
Constant tremors, slow movements, rigid muscles, even difficulty writing. This is the reality for mother of two Larissa Roberts living with Parkinson's disease. She's one of 100,000 in Australia, 10 million worldwide living with the condition, including Hollywood star Michael J. Fox, who's been battling the disease for 2 decades.
What the hell? Did you shake that up on purpose? Parkinson's.
This is Larissa. She suffers from dystonia, constant tremors. We observe foot drop, little arm movement, and a rigid upper body. With our patented medical device, Larissa experiences an immediate improvement. For the first time in years, she experiences hope. This is Bob. Bob's doctors had given up on him. They told him he was old and had Parkinson's. Bob falls, and I catch him. Bob is a changed man with our medical device. What we're doing is we're putting electronics into the socks. They've got pressure-sensitive insoles to detect stepping.
Co-creator Dr. Matthew Brodie believes his invention, Smart Socks, could change lives forever.
When the person has difficulty stepping, the computer tells the sock to vibrate. Left, right, the person with Parkinson's, their brain interprets that as a signal that they need to take a step. My experience. All right, so that was a video we put together a couple of years ago, and it was at the start of this journey. Obviously, we've come a long way since then. So people ask, how does this work? Imagine you're a healthy person. You don't really need to think about walking. You want to walk, and your arms and legs will do that without too much effort. Now, these neuromuscular signals that have to get all the way down to your feet, they can be weakened by disease, even old age. And it's not just Parkinson's. So what our theory is, if we can figure out what the person wants to do and provide the stimulation that's in time with what the person wants to do, then we can reinforce the signals that are sort of getting through. And then the result is, wow, I can now walk. And that's what we're hoping to achieve. So Billy Connolly has Parkinson's, and in his words, doctor, give me a light in the tunnel, and that's what we're about. We believe there's no competing technology that works, can improve walking and balance, improves quality of life, has no side effects, and is easy to use. So that's the background. Now I'm going to talk about the clinical study timeline that's been funded by generous support from Shake It Up Australia Foundation and the Michael J. Fox Foundation. So first of all, we've got study 1, which was looking at the immediate effect in the lab. Then we've got study 2, which was a long-term effect when people take the equipment home with them. And what we're about to start, which has been delayed a long time due to COVID, is a randomized control trial. And this is the highest quality of evidence, and we're starting that soon. So talking about clinical study 1, the immediate effect, our objective was to see if we could stabilize gait with peripheral neuronal stimulation. It was just a small study, 5 people with idiopathic Parkinson's disease, and we're looking at the gait changes after a single training session with the stimulation. Now, what were the outcomes? We got improved ability to walk and reduced what we call mental effort. It took less effort for the person to walk. We had lots of positive user experiences, and we had a number of suggestions for improvement. So this is the technology. Because falls are obviously important, we had some balance training on an iPad. We had these smart socks and some walk that provide stimulation and some walk training with them. And we also had incorporated visual cues, and this was in a single training session, and we wanted to get feedback from people with Parkinson's, how they felt about these components. So what were the results? Well, each line on this left graph represents a person, and you can see there is improved walking speed for everyone. These lines represent unstable gait, and you see gait has become stabilized. It's become more stabilized with the stimulation as opposed to without the stimulation. But more important than that is what people sort of felt about themselves, and they said their gait quality had improved. But the really interesting thing, which hasn't really been achieved with people with neurological conditions before, is they all said that the mental effort, except for this one that said it stayed the same, they all thought that the mental effort required to walk was reduced, and that's really quite a breakthrough. This means that when you're walking along, you can turn and talk to the person next to you, you can share in a joke, you don't have to spend 100% of your mental effort concentrating on walking. So some patient feedback include, I enjoyed it greatly, better than medication, it works like magic, helped me walk with more purpose, it stopped my legs shaking, I felt inspired, I did things I never thought I could. And anecdotally, this includes one person being able to walk without their stroller for the first time in 7 years down the corridor to their husband, and things like that can be an emotional experience. And at this point, I thought David Cox might like to comment on his experience with immediate effects, seeing he's here with us.
Thanks, Matt. Yes, I can relate to all of those points you make there, and certainly from my perspective, when I started this 12 months ago, I was actually quite surprised by the immediate effects. I thought, being a person who's still got fairly good mobility, I'm still able to walk reasonably well and even run a little bit and occasionally play golf. I didn't think I would notice such improvements, but I did. And the effects were quite immediate. Some of the things you touched on, like balance, the ability to walk across a road, spin your head around and not sort of fall over, the ability to turn more quickly, and so on. So, yes, I can relate to all of those, and the benefits were absolutely immediate. So, yes.
Thanks, David. Also, obviously, some people had some things that they didn't like. Some said the socks were a little bit difficult to put on. The buttons on the phone app were a little bit small. Some people didn't even like wearing socks, and others expressed that they had a little bit of fear that they might fall over. So we took that feedback on board, and then we did clinical study 2. So clinical study 2, we're looking at more of the long-term effects. We've proved there is some sort of effect, or there could be some sort of effect in the laboratory condition. Can we replicate this in the home environment? And does this have any effect on falls? So we got 12 people with wide-ranging symptoms. And what we're interested in is gait changes after a period of time of using this intervention in the home environment. What we found is it improved walking ability, reduced falls, we got more positive user experiences, and obviously some more suggestions for improvement. So the new technology, we worked more on this training app with the phone. We tried some more stimulation options such as insoles and bands and different things. There was the balance training too, because we thought preventing falls was important, and it was all tied in with this remote monitoring telehealth system, so we could keep track of what people were doing and give them encouragement if they needed it. So what I'm going to show you is now a couple of results. First, this is an example with a person with mild symptoms at baseline on the left and follow up on the right. So this is this is not immediate. This is after a few weeks of using the system. And so here we go. You'll see on the left, the person has got a slightly rigid upper body, particularly on the right side, the arm swing's not so good. And their turning's much better after a couple of weeks. And obviously they look like they're walking a lot more confidently. So now we will move on to the next. And this is an example of a person with slightly more severe symptoms. You'll see they've got reduced freezing of gait and improved gait stability. So on the left, that's baseline. On the right, that's follow-up after a few weeks training. The amazing thing is they decided at follow-up that they wouldn't even need their walker anymore, and they didn't even bring their walker into the lab. So this is a person with slightly more severe symptoms. And at follow-up, they had the confidence to turn up, and they'd even left their stroller at home. And you can see at the left, the person's starting their turns, while at the right, they're quite confident with their turning. Here on the left, they're sort of experiencing a little bit of freezing of gait symptoms. And they've also got a more stooped posture on the left. Obviously, you look on the right, there's still some things that could be improved. And we're looking at making this even better so we can treat some of those other symptoms. But remember, this was a couple of years ago, and we've moved on in what our system can do. So those were, and each result, you have to think each result is an emotional experience for everyone seeing these changes. We can't just see them as data points in a statistical analysis, but obviously we do the statistical analysis. If you get a p-value less than 0.05, it means it's significant. And what we saw was a 23% increase in walking speed, a 16% increase in step length, and remarkably, this unstable gait reduced and by 35%, and we actually saw less falls. But both clinical study 1 and clinical study 2, you have to be careful of these because they're not what's called a randomized controlled trial, and that's what's needed for really high quality evidence. This is the pilot studies that lead to a randomized controlled trial. So that's what we're about to start now. Now, the key thing about a randomized controlled trial is you can end up in any group. You might end up in the walking tall group, or you might end up in the mobility plus group, and that is randomized. And the assessors are blinded to what condition you're in or what group you're in. So there's less chance that the assessor will influence the outcomes by some preconceived notion about what they think should happen. So it's a randomized controlled study. There's 60 people living in Parkinson's, and there'll be a 3-month follow-up. And we'll include a health economic analysis. So we'll see, is this saving the health care system money? And it's starting soon in New South Wales. So if you're in New South Wales, we'll be recruiting for this study soon. We would have liked to have started it a while ago, but like many things, it's been delayed by COVID. So what's our technology? Well, we've improved the technology. You can see we've got an iPad on a stand here with a training mat. So this can be done now remotely. There's no need for face-to-face. This is the stimulation package for the walking program, and we've also improved our balance program. So we'll be starting that study soon. So where to from here? We've got these promising results in research, but that's actually a long way to getting them out to people like yourself for widespread use. So what have we achieved? We've shown technical feasibility with the first study. It works in the benchtop. Clinical feasibility, it works when people come into the lab. The second study showed usability. People can benefit from this with home use. What are we working on at the moment? First, we need to be sure we've got the value proposition right. Now, it's no point us doing a whole lot of research. Like me as a neuroscientist and an engineer, we want to make the best thing possible. But is this what we're doing going to end up in an affordable product so that people will use widely? Like we could make the perfect thing for $100,000. For example, but no one would be able to use it. So what we have to consider is, do the features people want equal an affordable product? And that's what the value proposition. We're working on getting an investment, so this can happen fast. Obviously, we don't want to be waiting 20 years for it to happen. We need to get more of this high quality clinical evidence through unbiased randomized controlled trials, and that's required for regulatory approval. And we also need these health economic analyses to show it saves money, because that will support the ability to get reimbursement for people. So the government will pay for some or all of this if we can show that it will save money because less people will end up in hospital. So what we have to do in the future is embark on this regulatory approval process to have a Class 2A medical device. And in Australia, that's TGA, Europe, that's CE, and then in the United States, we need FDA approval. And only once have we got that can we scale up our vision. And our vision is to help over 10 million people walk. So pathway to community use, this is where we are at the moment, 2018 to 22. We're building, measuring, learning, and we need to finish this process before we go on to the regulatory process. Because once we go on to the regulatory process, which can take a year, 2 years in itself, it actually you can't then change what you're doing. So you have to have it fixed beforehand. And only once we're through that can we then begin getting it out to people. So a vision towards helping 100 million people walk would work like this. We'll start with early adopters in Australia through different programs. We'll then open it up to all people with Parkinson's in Australia. And then in Australia, there's other diseases we can look at, like peripheral neuropathy, which we know benefit from the same technology. Then we take these Parkinson's disease global. And then if you look at treatable motor impairment, the people we could reach is actually 320 million. So, you know, that's not going to happen for a long time down the track, but it's good to have a vision to get somewhere. So currently our focus is, and this is part of this presentation, we want to engage everyone who's here and everyone who'll be watching this later remotely. And we want to engage a community to help us build, measure and learn, so we come up with something that is a viable proposition. So at this point, because David Cox has very kindly been involved in the build, measuring, learning loop, I thought he might like to have the floor for a while.
Thanks, Matt. Yes, as your crash test dummy, my friend, it's been an interesting journey. It's it's quite an exhilarating journey at times, experiencing all the new technology. As Matt said, I started in the early days with the smart socks, which were great. They had a few little limitations, like you know, things like battery life and the reliability of the signal and what have you. And some of those things I fed back to Matt, and he's ironed those out in subsequent iterations of the product, which has been fantastic. And he's continued to do so as I've provided feedback on the various iterations between then and now. These days I'm testing the latest and greatest ankle bands, which is equally good with some snazzy new control technology. And, you know, things are, I'm delighted with what I'm currently testing. In fact, they're a lot of fun. And as I said earlier, there's a lot of benefits to the technology. And as Matt continues to improve the technology, the benefits only increase as well. You know, overall, I'd say that they just make my life better, my walking easier. And to touch on that, that's both physically and mentally. So, you know, that effort that's required to just walk to the shop sometimes can be quite overwhelming. And with the bands, I'm able to do those sorts of things very, very easily. You know, others have noticed my walking improve immensely as well. So my lovely wife, upon seeing me walk with the bands the first time about 6 months ago, said I hadn't seen David walk like that for about 5 or 6 years. That's the David of old, which is very, very pleasing. Some of my very good friends have noticed my gait has improved significantly. In fact, Matt and I and a number of other people walked 42 kilometres from Bondi to Manly about 3 or 4 months ago as a fundraising exercise and as a test, a real acid test of the bands themselves. And it was a lot of fun. We raised some money for Parkinson's research, which was great as an aside. But the bands really stood up to the test. They were very reliable. I walked incredibly well. My friends couldn't believe how well I was walking. In fact, I finished up running the last couple of Ks with Matt Brodie. Such was my, you know, I guess performance on the day, improved by the devices. So, you know, it's fantastic stuff. I've been delighted to be involved. I'm looking forward to testing future iterations of the products, Matt. And, you know, if any of you want to be involved in Coxey's Long Walk, and excuse me for providing a bit of a plug there, Vicky, but hopefully we'll see a few of you next year along for the Anzac Day walk from Bondi to Manly. And good luck to Matt and all his colleagues to in, you know, developing this product further.
Are you there, Matthew? You're on
Sorry.
mute. You need to come off mute.
Thank you. Yes. I was just saying, Coxey's Long Walk next year, all welcome. it was a great time. We had good fun. You don't need to wear my stimulation bands. You don't need to have Parkinson's disease. The more we can get to do it, the better. We hope to grow it year on year. And next year, we're also offering, we'll be doing different lengths, not just 42 kilometres, but you can do a 10 kilometre walk from the Split Bridge to Manly, or also a 5 kilometre option. And, you know, maybe we'll get 100 people there next year and 1,000 people the year after. That'll be good. So, engaging a community in co-design. This is, some of you might have already completed the survey on the link. Now, because we've got a little bit of time, everyone who's here, I'd like you to go to the link I put in the chat. And if you haven't already filled in the survey, or if you want to fill in the answers differently, because you've heard me talk and now what you think might have changed, you're welcome. What we're trying to do with this survey is find out what people want, and because me as an engineer and neuroscientist, I want to put every single feature there and give it all the bells and whistles, but is that what people really want? And the balance of what people want is that going to be an affordable thing? Because everything costs money, and there's no point, it's a waste of resources to do a clinical trial on a product that's got so many features that it works wonderfully, but in the end, no one will be able to afford to buy it. So that's what we talk about, understanding what the value proposition. So please follow this link here and complete the survey. I will just go through it briefly now for those who haven't completed it. So I'll just hold on a second. So this is what the survey looks like. You get to it through the link that is in the chat. Now, this is the only compulsory question. Who are you? Are you a person living with Parkinson's, or a clinician, family member, carer, or other? So tick one of them. Now, the way this works is I have these statements, and you can either strongly disagree, neither agree, or strongly agree. So, I am interested in a new medical device that will improve walking. Well, maybe you don't want it to get any better at walking, so you'd click strongly disagree. And then you'd go through all these. Or maybe you want to get better, so you'd click strongly agree. Hello? Okay.
Sorry. So I'm not able to get onto it. I'm just grabbing my husband.
Sorry.
Okay.
I'm trying to fill in this survey and I can't get onto it's not working.
What's the survey?
Could we just ask everybody to mute themselves, please?
Sorry.
So we can hear somebody talking.
So, in the chat, can people see the chat from the Teams? If you can see the chat from the Teams, there is a link. If you can't get onto it right now, just go back to the invitation Vicky said, and there will be a link in that invitation. Anyway, but the more people who fill out the survey, the more we're able to make sure that the direction our research is going to benefit the most people. So these are just different questions. I mean, do you want a device that's waterproof? Is that important? Or is it more important that it's affordable? Do you want something that includes games and rewards, is fun to use? Or is it more important that it works really well? So you've got to just decide what's important. I had to click something there before it would let me go on. And there's other things about this which I won't go through. But this is sort of where the value proposition comes in, is you've chosen all these features. You want a device that lasts for a certain amount of time, and then you have to decide, well, how much do I think that device should be worth? Because we want to make a device that's affordable. So if you've chosen a lot of features that you think are important, then probably the device is going to cost a little bit more to make. And then there's questions about, do you think the government should reimburse this? And when you've finished, if you're interested in being part of a future clinical trial, make sure you tick this box, being part of a future clinical trial. If you just want to know about updates on progress, you can tick this box. If you want to be part of a clinical trial, you'd actually have to put some information in here so we're able to contact you. And don't forget to click submit when you've finally done all that. And that information, we've already had 94 responses to the survey, which is absolutely fantastic. But the more we can get, the better. And if you can recommend this to your friends or family members or even your neurologist to have a look at it, and the more opinions we can get, the better we know how to make sure our research is going in the right direction. This is what is called early community engagement, and it's very important that we have a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down approach. So it is the people who are most affected who get input into what is done in the future research. So there, I'll stop sharing that, and I will go back to the file. I'll go back to the slideshow and share the final screen. Share, sorry for this delay. So that was engaging a community in co-design. We've just done that live. It may be the first time we've tried to do something like that, but as I said, the response so far from everyone has been fantastic. I hope that we'll end up getting about 200 responses, and we're about halfway there. If you've already filled it in and you've now want to change your mind because now you know a little bit more, you're welcome to fill it in a second time. And for everyone who watches this after the event, I'll be leaving the survey open for 1 to 2 weeks. So there's still time for you to fill it in. So final words from person living with Parkinson's disease. This was another great moment when you can see that how this can affect people. This was a poem that was written by someone after using the device for a while. Once I realized that I didn't need to concentrate on every single step. I could feel the breeze on my face and look up to see the beautiful green trees and the blue sky. So thank you, Shake It Up Australia Foundation, for your great support with this research program. It wouldn't have happened without funding, and it wouldn't happen without the people with Parkinson's coming in and being research subjects and the involvement of everyone. So thank you, and thank you, David, for presenting this with me. We're happy to take questions.
So we've got a few questions already, and if I can ask people to type their questions into the conversation to the chat bar on the right-hand side of the page. So first one is from Michelle. She has DBS. She's had DBS. Can she use this technology to help her walk?
Yes. This technology is designed to be used, is designed not to replace anything you're already using, but just to be used as well as.
And from Jeanette, is the technology available for anyone to use, e.g. the balance program you're talking about?
No, because this is a medical device, and medical device has to be proven to work first, and it has to go through regulatory approval, and that takes time and resources to do. So that's what we're trying to do. So unfortunately, it is not available for people to use. We do have different clinical trials we will be running, and as a disclaimer, I imagine it will be about 2 years before we can get through all the regulatory approval processes. So please don't get your hopes up that you can get this in a week's time. I'm sorry about that. But on the flip side of that, you know when you get a medical device that it's been through all these processes. So we're not that's why they're there. They're there to protect people.
Now, another one from Burnt. Is it good on stairs to use?
Well, there's no reason why you can't use it on stairs, but working with people with Parkinson's, what I've found is they're often quite good on stairs anyway, because the stairs provide a visual cue about where to step. So yes, it would work on stairs. It works anywhere, but I've actually found people with Parkinson's are usually quite good on stairs anyway. But yes, it can't be used swimming unless we make a waterproof version. But other than that.
Okay, now Leah has asked, do you have to be in Sydney to be an early adopter?
No, but the clinical trial we're currently doing, we've only got ethical approval to do that really in the Sydney area. The early adopters program is something we want to set up, but we need to get the resources and everything ready for that. So that's probably something that's a couple of months away. But when we do early adopters, we're quite happy to take people from all around the country.
And from Burnt, can it be paid for from the NDIS?
So the NDIS is, that's part of the reimbursement. So that's government reimbursement. So it can't be paid for by the NDIS because it's not even available to be bought yet. But the feedback from people is that they want reimbursement. So that's good. Now, to get through reimbursement, we have to prove to the people who do reimbursement that it's actually saving the healthcare system money. So to do that, we have to finish our clinical trial and we have to do a health economic analysis on it. So it is our goal to get to reimbursement. But as you can imagine, there's a lot of forms and processes that have to be followed before you can reach that goal.
Okay, thank you. And from Michelle, can we invest to help financially?
So there's in that survey, there's a box you can tick if you're interested in more information about investing. We're looking at that about how to do that. My vision is to actually have people with Parkinson's having some ownership of this solution, because then it keeps us, I suppose, honest that we're on the right track. So hopefully, yes, but there's a few legal documents that need to be checked first, and everything needs to be put in place. And also, as a disclaimer, don't invest in something unless you're prepared that you might lose your money, because nothing in investment is a sure thing.
Okay, thank you, Matt. From Christy, is there any difference people have found wearing just the socks indoors as opposed to wearing the socks outside with shoes on?
David, do you want to talk about your experiences indoors and outdoors?
Yeah, sure, Matt. It's look, there's no difference as far as I can tell. I've worn them indoors with bare feet. I've worn them outdoors on the outside of my jeans, underneath my socks, in all circumstances. So no, there's no difference at all. It works across all those scenarios.
Thanks, David. From Vanessa, it makes sense that the technology attached to the feet and legs improves walking, but how does the technology impact on upper body symptoms?
Well, that's the amazing thing. We never really expected such changes. Now, if you go back to the first video I showed, and you can review this recording later to check it, but you'll see the person who was actually one of the first people ever to try this technology, they had a rigid upper body and little arm swing, and somehow just by providing the stimulation at the feet, it was actually possible that the upper body returned to quite a normal pattern. So what I think it does is it helps the signal get through. And once you overcome that noise to get the signal through, it can help with other areas. And that ties into it requiring less mental effort. Now, David, I mean, once again, you can talk about your personal experiences about feeling more balanced, or
yeah, sure, Matt.
thoughts?
I can, and I have not used any stimulation on the upper body at all, just around the ankles and such like. But I found not only was my gait, my legs moving better, but for some strange reason, my arms were naturally more coordinated and better. So I have a little bit of a lack of arm swing on the right-hand side, and that, when I'm out walking with the bands on, I don't seem to notice that. So yes, look, I don't know why, but it certainly works for me that way. Yes.
And
question. Sorry, did you want to add more to that, Matt?
I'll just add that our experiences is every person with Parkinson's is an individual and has individual symptoms. And whilst one thing might work well for someone with a certain setup, you might need a slightly different setup for someone else. And so a one-size-fits-all approach is difficult to come by, and my vision for this is it will probably be offered with the help of a physiotherapist or your neurologist or something to make sure it's set up right for you.
Okay, next question is from Harry. Are there any opportunities for people to beta test your device?
Well, like we've mentioned the early adopters, which we haven't quite got going, because the more feedback we can get, the better. And we've mentioned the clinical trial if you're in New South Wales. But also, moving forward, we're going to need more clinical trials, and we're going to have multi-site clinical trials outside New South Wales towards getting that regulatory approval. So all that's dependent on obviously whether funding applications for doing this type of research is successful. But I've no reason to think it shouldn't be successful given the early successes we've had.
And just back to the question on stairs, Bernt's comment on that is stairs going down are a big problem, but stairs going up are no worries for people with Parkinson's. David, have you used the socks on stairs? Have you noticed any difference?
I have used the socks on stairs, down hills, jumping off rocks and stuff, and they work very well, Vicky. Yeah, so they give me generally more confidence to go both up and downstairs. No worries at all.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, I was following David on this marathon walk from Bondi to Manly, which you're all welcome to come on next year, as we mentioned. And there are a number of stairs through the national park there. And the interesting thing was that David would be walking along at his normal cadence, and then he'd come to the downstairs and he'd more or less double his cadence down the stairs. And then he'd pick up at the same cadence when he got to the flat, and didn't look like he had Parkinson's at all. And did we mention he ran about the last 5 kilometers and finished before everyone else?
Yes, David did mention that. Great outcome. Now we have another question. Yoling her mother has Parkinson's and lives currently in Malaysia. Would she be able to participate in the trial?
Not in a clinical trial. No, there's no way I'd get ethics for that.
Okay.
Things like this are governed by ethical approval, and it's hard enough to get ethical approval anyway. I can't imagine being able to get it in Malaysia from Australia, unless there happened to be a neurologist in Malaysia who said, right, let's do a trial in Malaysia, and they could be in charge of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't run it from Australia.
No. Okay, fair enough. Now, Bernd wants to know when it's going to start. So you're going to open recruitment for this trial shortly, aren't you?
That's right. We were going to open it right when Sydney went into lockdown.
Joys of lockdown. So does that mean once lockdown is over, you'll look to open the trial, Matthew?
Yes, and we're looking to, we can also do it remotely. So we might start, if this lockdown continues indefinitely, we might just start the clinical trial remotely. Now, the, what's it called? The caveat I have to say about a clinical trial is you don't know which group you're going to end up in, because it's a randomized controlled clinical trial. So you could end up in one of two programs, and the assessors will be blinded to that. But we need that comparison to prove definitively that it's not a placebo effect and so forth.
So everybody on the call understands, as soon as Matthew opens the trial for recruitment, we will have it up on our website, and we will be notifying everybody who's registered on our clinical trials database. So if you haven't registered on that, you can do that on our website. If you click on the research tab and then on the drop down bar, clinical information about clinical trials, and you can register there, and we will notify you when the recruitment is open for that trial. Harry has made a comment that this is something that has great potential to meet an unmet need in people with PD. Yes, we agree with your comment, and we're delighted to be funding Matthew's project, research project. Now, Stephen says...
I'll just comment on that I've spent a long time in research, and you try things often and they sort of work, and you get enough people and you show an effect. But this has been a different journey, that you can just have one person and see the difference. And okay, that's very bad scientific evidence, but it is quite good emotionally. But it's anecdotal and it's a few people, but when it really works really well, you don't need large numbers to see that. But in terms of satisfying repeatability of research and all the procedures to make sure something's done well and there's no harms, we have to go through all these processes. But this has been different from other studies I've been involved in, because this time things worked better than expected. And now we're playing catch up to explain why. But, you know, there's a lot of things you do, like deep brain stimulation, that no one really knows why it works, but it works.
Now, Stephen has a question. Would you use the device for all of your waking hours? So I guess, do you want to answer that, or is that something David should answer, having trialled it?
Yeah, I can't comment on how a person with Parkinson's should use it. So David, please.
Yeah, I would. You certainly could use it for all your waking hours, but I don't. Maybe it's because my symptoms are fairly mild still. I wouldn't need to use it all my waking hours. I'd probably use it when I was going out somewhere, doing a lot of walking, maybe just to counter sort of some of my wearing off effects, when my drugs aren't sort of quite right. But you could, but I would probably choose not to.
I guess that also different would it between people with different varying degrees of Parkinson's?
Exactly.
How they were impacted. So
yeah, David had a interesting comment to me, if he remembers, about how he felt worse after a couple of days. So this is actually interesting to me, if he wants to elaborate on that.
Yeah, look, I actually don't know whether my brain and body was expecting the technology to still be strapped onto my ankles or not, but I used it just recently, and a couple of days later I didn't feel quite so good. So, maybe my body's craving it like it's craving the drugs. I'm not sure, but certainly, the effects are significant for me. Benefits are significant. But you're right, Vicky, the individual nature of this disease means that, there could be wide variance in how the technology is used.
And what I've seen is there is a carryover effect. So I brought one of my physiotherapists down to do a training session with David, and we watched David walk, and then David put the device on and he walked and did some turns like we asked. They were better. Then he turned off the device and did the same thing, and he was actually still better. So there is some sort of carryover effect, and we're even wondering if that lasts in the order of a couple of days if you've been using it for a while. So that might explain why David felt worse after a couple of days, because it is just dropping off to carry over effect. Certainly the home-based trial showed that there was improvement even when the stimulation was turned off after a few weeks of using it. But once again, caveat, all this evidence is pretty small numbers and hasn't gone through the rigors of a randomized controlled trial, which is what we're trying to do.
Okay, next question is from Joe. Joe is a neurological physiotherapist and has patients in the UK who would be keen to join a trial for this device. Could this be possible? I guess that's the same answer as the Malaysian question, isn't it?
No, this is a little bit different because Jo is a neurological physiotherapist and is capable of running her own clinical trial. So if she can get funding to run a clinical trial, there's nothing to stop us providing devices for her to do that. But she'll be responsible for getting ethics and everything.
Okay.
And finding the funding for it. So good luck.
Bert wants to know if it will be available in Queensland. That would be the next part of the trial, would it?
Yeah, so this current one that Shake It Up Australia Foundation is funding is New South Wales only, but we're going to take what we learn from that, and then before we get regulatory approval, we're going to need to do something that's multi-site. And I've already seen from the responses from the survey that there are a lot of people in Queensland who are interested, so it makes sense to therefore maybe have a site in Queensland. And that would be dependent on finding a neurologist or neurological physiotherapist up there who's willing to take on that responsibility to run it in that state.
Okay, well that's the last of our questions. Are there? We've got a couple more minutes left on our scheduled call. Are there any more questions out there before we let Matthew and David go?
I couldn't find the chat, so could I ask a question just verbally?
Sure.
So listening to what David was saying and what Matthew's been saying, would this device be like a lifelong thing, or do you sort of kind of get better and then just take it off, or is this something you would always need to have around? That's my question.
I suspect that when you first get it, it would be most beneficial if you go through an intensive period with training with it to get some gains. And then my feeling is that maybe you have to use it less often to just maintain that. But on the flip side of that, we all know that we're all getting a little bit older and maybe our symptoms are getting worse over time. So maybe you have to just keep doing whatever you can do. And
what happens when this device is updated? Do you sort of just get the updated version and like every time, or is it going to be like a one-off thing that will stay like that, or then not get up? Well, it would get updated, wouldn't it? I mean, because as you find out how to improve, it would probably be improved to some extent.
Yeah, this is one of the hard things about a medical device, is that once you've got approval for something, it's actually quite a long process to then getting the updates through.
Oh.
Because everything has to be, so of course, we're always trying to do the best thing possible, but it is a process that can take a little bit of time with the regulatory requirements, because we can't just make a change without proving once again that the change is beneficial.
No. So who do you have to prove this to?
Yeah, everything has to be proved with high quality evidence before it would be allowed to be used just widespread by the public. And that's to protect people from people just going out there and saying anything and preying on vulnerable people with a miracle cure that may not exist.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions before we finish?
David, there's a question in regards to the app that runs on the phone. Can you just give a brief overview on how you adjusted the speed and the intensity of the device?
So from my perspective, I found it very, very easy. The app on the phone was, it's like any simple phone app, a number of little buttons that you can touch to increase the cadence or the strength of the signal, that buzzes into your ankle, and all that sort of stuff. But it's also got a number of settings which are quite handy. There's a walk setting, a sort of a faster walk setting, a slow walk setting, and there's an ability, as I understand, Matt, to configure it pretty much any way you like. So I really like the ability the app gave you to configure it to your own personal needs, the way you like to walk, and that I found very, very handy indeed. So Matt, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, what I've found is every person is an individual, and it actually needs it needs to be fine-tuned to get the best out of it, and that's where it makes sense to actually do this together with a health professional who's familiar with you, because you may not get the best out of it if you just tried to do it yourself. So that's where we'd be involving the neurologist or physiotherapist in the process. Right now, as part of our clinical trials, we take on that role. But thinking when it's out there, yeah, it's very important that you're able to fine tune to what you're able to do. I forgot to mention the device actually has sensors in it, so it can detect your intent, and it could automatically match what you're wanting to do as well. And that's part of the magic, that being able to fine tune things to what people want to do. And when you just get it and it's there, then everything works fantastically. If you don't get it right, you just don't see the same benefits.
So Matthew, Michelle says thank you for the hope, and one more question from Rob, which
Thanks,
is
Michelle.
battery life.
David, how long's the battery life?
Well, it used to be pretty ordinary in the early days, Matt, as I provided that feedback to you, but these days it's exceptionally good. On that walk, which was over about 8.5, 9 hours, I think, end to end, the battery survived right till the end. So that was pretty good. I thought it was excellent. In fact, 8, 9 hours. Yep.
Okay, well, that's all our questions. So thank you very much, Matthew and David, for presenting your research, and to everybody who's joined the call. As I said, if you're interested in finding out when this clinical trial is ready to recruit, please click on the research tab on our website and register for our clinical trials. And please help Matthew with his research. And if you didn't complete that survey during the chat, then please do it in the next few days, so that Matthew has that information to work on, which will make the development much more acceptable for you as PD users. So thank you, Matthew. Thank you, David, and we'll look forward to seeing you all at our next monthly research forum.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. That was great. And like Vicky said, just that survey, if you recommend it to your group and your family and people who are in the Parkinson's community, the more we can get in the next week or so, the better picture that we can know that we're going in the right direction.
And also, if people do want to re-look at your presentation, Matthew, it will be up on the website in the next couple of days. And that, again, is also on the research tab on our website. If you click on that tab, it's the very last one on the drop-down bar, research forums. So thank you, everybody. And wherever you are, stay safe, particularly if you're in lockdown. Good night.
Thanks,
Good
Vicky.
night. Thanks, guys.